Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are exploring how to incorporate the things we're learning from the books on our shelves into our life. Looking forward to having another discussion today as we explore the pages of the books Atomic Habits by James Clear. We are heading into chapter 6, which is for the first principle of the book, which is about making things obvious. This is the first law of the book, making habits obvious. Now, before we get into chapter 6, Sam and I want to just round out what we talked about last episode about habit stacking. So if you missed the last episode, we'd invite you to go ahead and listen to that. If you don't have time to do that and you're just ready and really excited and raring to go on this episode, that's fine as well. But we'd love for you also to subscribe. Every Wednesday, we come out with new episodes, and we're available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. So if you want to share this with others, they'll be able to access this wherever they like to listen to episodes as well. So again, my name is Denise Russo. Excited to be here again with my co-host today, Sam Powell. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I feel a little bad for leaving everybody on a cliffhanger last time, but we're trying to be really good about keeping these episodes short so they don't take up much of your time and you can get on with your day and your habits. But I'm glad we can hop back to it, round it off, and then it'll fit in nicely with the next chapter, which is one of the really important ones, I think.
I think so too. So where we ended off last time and where we want to go a little bit deeper, at least for the beginning of this episode, is on something that someone named BJ Fogg started called the Tiny Habits Program. And he refers to this strategy as a tiny habits recipe. James Clear took that concept and turned it into what he calls habit stacking. Now, Sam, this is something that you've been able to incorporate in your own life over the last several weeks. And so I'm curious if you could share a little bit about what you do now that you weren't doing before to say to yourself consciously, after I do something, then I'm going to do this other thing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm really trying to live this book as we do it. So if I'm building this up, right, where this came from was identity-based habits. Who do I want to be, right? And so I picked a few descriptors of what I'd like Sam to be, right? And one of those things that I decided was I wanted to be a morning person. I'm not. I am the person who in my late 30s could sleep till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. No problem. Easy peasy. Could do it. Right. So I want to be a morning person. It serves the person that I want to be. And so I decided that what I wanted to do was to look at my morning routine and think, okay, well, what would a morning person do? And what am I already doing? So I have really been trying to make it real obvious. What am I doing? So I looked through my routine. I spent a few days just tracking what am I doing every morning, right? What does that look like? And when I say tracking, I mean breaking it down into little things. I wake up at this time. I turned my alarm off. I snoozed it 5 times. I then scrolled Facebook for 30 minutes before I could open my eyes all the way. Then I went to the bathroom. Then I got dressed. And then I did this. And then I did right. So I tracked it up until the point where I kind of thought, okay, my day is going now. And so then I went through, just like James says, and I said, okay, this one serves me, this one doesn't serve me, this one does, this one doesn't, right? This is what I want to do, what I don't want to do. And so then what I decided was, okay, of all the things I'd like to keep, I want to insert some other things into my morning routine that are going to cast the vote of the person that I want to be, right? I want to be someone who's constantly learning. I want to be an author, right? I want to be someone who can help other people in their own growth journey. So how am I casting a vote? What little tiny little action could I take that's casting the vote of that identity? So I started with, okay, I need to wake up at a certain time, right? So I need to set my alarm every single day, right? I had my alarm set Monday through Friday, but not on Saturday and Sunday. So I said, all right, alarm's getting changed. It's going off at a certain time, and we'll see how that goes. Then what's the next, thing that I want to make sure that I hit, right? So for me, I would like to be a person who is active and working out. I'm not that today. Let's be super clear. Absolutely not at all. I have not worked out in a while, but a person who works out is somebody who puts on workout clothes. So I get up, I put on workout clothes. Then I come downstairs and I make coffee. I was already making coffee. So, all right, I was already waking up and I was already getting dressed. So I just tweaked it a little bit, right? I want to wake up at a specific time. And it wasn't necessarily that I get out of bed. I'm going to build towards that. I would like to get out of bed by a certain time. It's that I woke up. I did not hit the snooze. I was not going to be somebody who snoozed for 45 minutes or 90 minutes. Yes, I have snoozed every single minute for 90 minutes before. That is something I have done shamefully. So I'm not going to be that person, right? So I tweaked what I was already doing and then building upon that, right? So I come down and I make coffee every morning. So after I make coffee, then what do? I would like to cast a vote of somebody who is reflective, who is, then looking forward, that sort of thing. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do a daily journal entry. I used to do that a while ago. I lost the habit, I did whatever. So I bought a little tiny little journal that's not very big, so you can't write very much. So it takes me a minute or less to just write what I did yesterday. What are the highlights? What are the big things I'd like to remember if I were to look back 10 years from now? What would matter, right? Like what I ate for dinner doesn't matter. But the fact that like yesterday was third grade parent orientation, that's a thing, right? Like I'd like to know that down the road. Like when was that? How did I feel about it, right? Like what was my take on it? So I started writing those things down again real quick. And then and that comes right after coffee. So it's coffee and then that. And then I had a calendar on my desk that my husband got me that is a motivational quote a day. And I love it. It's like one of my favorite things that I own because it just gives me like a tiny little bit of inspiration. So I inserted journal after coffee before flipping the calendar. So my routine in this habit stacking is now coffee, journal, thing. And if I back up, it's putting on workout clothes, coffee, journal, and then flipping the calendar. The waking up, the putting on clothes, like I was doing that. So I'm just tweaking like a little tiny bit because it's casting a vote. Is I'm somebody who puts on workout clothes because eventually I'm going to be somebody who works out. Not yet, but eventually, right? I'm somebody who's reflective, right? I'm learning from my experiences. So I'm someone who journals, right? And so I'm inserting these small things. Am I doing the whole shebang the way I wanted to? No, right? Absolutely not. And so I came up with a list of, it's probably like 10 things, but they're really, really small. I keep the book, one of the books I'm reading. I'm always constantly reading 2 books, one romance book and one learning book. So I keep the learning book on my desk right next to my journal, right? So I get the coffee, I write in the journal, I flip the calendar, I then go to my planner. I already looked at my planner every single day. So I inserted that. And then I do a meditation and I do a 2-minute meditation. That's it. And I use a timer. I use the exact same meditation. It's super boring. I have 3 that I can choose from. I don't do anything different, right? It's just, do I need to be inspired? Do I need to be focused? Or do I need to be whatever, right? What's my chaotic energy that I'm feeling at the moment? Like, and so I'm just inserting these little tiny things. And then it's okay. Then I pick up that book that I was already reading anyways at some chaotic period in time. But now I'm going to read one section, not even a whole chapter, one section. And that way, like I highlight it. And then I'm going to write down one thing I learned from that book in my filing of stuff. This is something I picked up from John Maxwell. He reads, he files all of his learnings. Well, I would like to be somebody who writes. In order to write, I need to learn and to file away quotes that I might want to use and things like that. So I just basically built out this little tiny system that is now just a morning routine, right? And it's a checklist, and I keep it right next to the place that I put my coffee down. So I've stacked all these habits, all these little tiny habits in between the things that I'm doing. Is it totally naturally for me to like go straight from coffee to the journaling? No, it's not yet. But eventually I'm going to get to the point where I don't have to think about it. So instead of, oh gosh, what was this whole complicated morning routine? It was, what are these short little tiny things? And I'm going to build this neural pathway in my mind that makes me think when I'm drinking coffee, I now want to journal. And I'm trying to like cut out all the distraction in between and just go from one thing to the next so that I journal and then I flip my calendar and then I do my planner, and that planner is then the trigger for, now I feel a certain way and I got to meditate to get into the state I want to get into. And then I learn, and then I write that down, and then I write something about it. And then I go change out of my workout clothes into regular clothes, because somebody who works out also is somebody who gets dressed for real life. And so I'm doing that, right? Eventually I'm going to insert working out in here somewhere. but like, I can't do it all right now. So I'm just trying to experiment and to streamline it really at the end of the day. And so what James kind of finishes this last chapter with is figure out when you're most likely to be successful, right? So like, when are you most likely to make all these things happen? And then like, that's where you should really do it. So I'm experimenting with that in this habit stacking. I'm trying to figure out like, okay, what if I really want to do this whole routine every single morning? What time do I need to wake up? Now school's back in session. So now I got to pack a lunch and get a snack and, make sure the homework is done and all this other stuff and get my son to the bus stop. So those things are timed. Like the bus stop is at a certain time. So what do I have to have done before that or after that or during that or, whatever. So I'm just really experimenting with what's working and what's not working in tiny, tiny, tiny little consumable ways. And now I'm at the place where I've done this for, I think I'm on day 12 now of all of this. And I've checked it up every single day. I have done this morning routine every day for 12 days. And I haven't missed a day, even a weekend, right? A weekend, 12 days, a weekend's happened. A weekend where I went to sports activities, where I had a day of nothing, where I did whatever, right? Like I've gone out of the house and in the house. I've had different dates. So I'm now kind of experimenting what's working, what's not working, what do I need to adjust to make that happen? But it's become consistent. And the big thing that I've noticed, right, is that as I'm just doing this and just forcing myself through it, it's changing the entire tone of my day, right? And that was my goal. I wanted to start the day in a certain way. I wanted to end the day in a certain way, which included flossing my teeth every day. I'm back to flossing my teeth every day. I have not missed for 10 days. So it's funny. It's this little thing that's casting a vote of who I would like to be. It's kind of restructuring the entire tone. I have been way more productive. I've been way less distracted in all of this space. It's really been incredible. And my little habit tracker, I literally just made it in Word. It's super easy. It's just this thing. I'll happily send it to anybody who wants to reach out and wants to have it. Like, send me a note on LinkedIn. And it's super easy, but it's really making a gigantic, powerful impact in my day. And I don't know. I wanted to share that story with people because we're not only reading this book and talking about this book and thinking about the stories, but like we're actually trying to live this too. And I don't know. So far it's working, and I'll keep everybody updated as we're doing these recordings and these sessions and these podcasts, because like I said at the very first episode, I think if I implement this book, it's going to change my life. Well, I'm implementing the book, and 12 days later, it's changing my life since I decided to really start to act on it. So
I love that you're sharing this, Sam, because the book we did before this book is so apropos, isn't it? Because that was Coach Wooden, the 7 principles that shaped his life and will change yours. And what you just shared is what we both read and learned and lived out loud, which was one of the principles that talked about drinking deeply from good books. And what we are trying to do. And the reason that this entire podcast even exists, it all came from people asking for recommendations on books because they were things that I was living out loud. And we decided that we wanted to share that with others. And I'm so curious to see how this continues to evolve for you. What I'm hearing you share with this story is that you took something that was either unconscious or subconscious, you raised it into your conscious awareness, you made an intentional decision and choice about something you wanted to do, be, or have, you wrote it down, you checked it off every day, creating these new habits with tiny little changes. And it made me think about, I had, I don't even remember when, it's been some time ago now, there was a video out, it was YouTube, even before TikTok came out. There was this YouTube video from a retired U.S. Navy admiral named William McRaven. And his speech was like a speech that he gave to some college students at their graduation, where he was talking about how little things can change your life. And he was giving the analogy of making your bed. And so how making your bed can be that one thing that can maybe help you change the world by that simple act of when you wake up, do one thing. And if you do that one thing, what other thing can you do? And that's the point of habit stacking. Do this one thing and then do this other thing. And so I was sharing with you off the show, off microphone, about Vincent, my son, I told him about the video. He saw the video, and then I bought the book, and then I gave him a copy of the book, which is from McRaven. In fact, Scott, when you're editing this, if you could put into the show notes, it's called Make Your Bed by William H. McRaven. It's really short. It's a really tiny book. So to your point, Sam, doing tiny things that make a big difference. It's a tiny book. And one of the things that Vincent has been doing since he's been in college, this is his second year, but in a new dorm with new roommates, new year, new environment, is that every morning Vincent takes a picture once he finishes making his bed, and with intention, he sends the picture to me and then says some kind of a little note to start his day. And he has found that it has given him, just like you said, Sam, more clarity, more peace, more energy, more focus. It's helped him to be able to really navigate his day in a much better way. So clearly I have to take the lessons from both of you and this other book that is sitting on my shelf that probably now needs to come off of the shelf. One of the things that James talks about in the book is that you need to consider when you're most likely to be successful and to not ask yourself to do a habit when you're likely to be preoccupied doing something else. So the key here, it sounds like, is what's taking priority for you. And Sam, you were just sharing that you have this vision in your mind for who you now want to become. You and I both went through a transition. We're both redefining the next version, or I like to call it, or we like to call it, your next chapter or your signature story towards the next best in life as we turn the pages together. How important is it for you that as you started creating these new habits in the morning, or even creating an environment, which is what we're going to be talking about next, how important has that been for you to be able to have this, what sounds like monumental success in less than 2 weeks?
I mean, this has just been like, I don't know, like, I think I'm really trying to focus on what, I don't know, just like living this out very specifically. But as you were asking me this question, I got distracted because I was thinking about something I read this morning through my morning routine, about it's the book that I'm learning from, right? So I was reading a romance novel. I was learning from another book. The book I'm currently learning from is John Maxwell's "Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn" book. And what you were saying and what you were asking me, the quote that came to mind. So this is kind of random and probably not exactly what you asked me, but like we're ADD at the moment. It's John says, "Take responsibility for becoming the person God created you to be, not someone else." So it's this thought process of like, I'm in this space and moment where I want to take responsibility for my life. My life isn't something that happens to me. It happens through me. And so I want to, which is from another book that I read called the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leaders, which is one of my favorite books. But I think that that's really where this came from, is that I really wanted to take a conscious responsibility for my life. And in doing that, I'm going to lean on the strengths that I have. I'm a really great systems person. You tell me you got a problem, we're going to come up with a system that's going to make it work for you and make it simple and make it easy. And so I realized, like, as I was thinking about this and doing all of this, is that I work super well off of clearing up my brain for better thinking activities and things like that. So I just decided that I'm going to be the best version of myself. And one of the best ways I can do that is to really rely on the strengths that I have, which is in checklists and systems and checking things off. And so by creating this complex person that I want to be, right, that does all these things and bees all these things and helps others to be all of these things, I could rely on the things that I'm really good at by simplifying out and taking the cognitive processing out of becoming that person. So I was just going to say, okay, this person looks like this. They do these types of things. For me, that looks like this, that I would like to hit up these simple things. And so instead of using this habit stacking and like this finding the right time to do stuff, I said, okay, I'm just going to focus on the morning and starting the day off in a certain way. So little tiny slice, and I'm not going to focus on the rest of it. Like what I do during the day is whatever I do during the day. I have no habits during the day at all. They're just in the morning. or ones that I'm focused on. I have lots of habits that I do during the day because that's how we work. But I just wanted a system where I don't think about it at all. I just check the boxes and that's all I'm doing. It's when I find myself wandering, when I find myself distracting, when I find the time getting in my way, right? Like, oh, all of a sudden it's time for the bus. And so I'm in the middle of only step 7 of my checklist. Okay, I'm interrupted. I go to the bus, I come back, and I just pick right back up. I don't do anything else. I'm not allowed to do anything between putting on my workout clothes and taking off my workout clothes. I do my whole morning routine in my workout clothes. I don't work out, but like, right. And it's that change in, that thought process and like what I do in the middle. So I don't think that answered the question that you asked me whatsoever, but that's the ADD that I went down.
we both are traversing that world together. And so, a couple of things as we round out this particular chapter that I think are important to talk about. One is you've got this checklist, and it would be awesome if we share that checklist with our listeners. Also, James has a checklist, and it's a template actually, and you can reference it at atomichabits.com/habit stacking. They talked about in the book one more thing as we round out this particular topic, which is about stacking is really just chaining small habits together. And it got me to thinking while you were telling your story, and I was thinking about another story, which is how we think together, which is why I just love talking with you, is that sentence reminded me of something you shared with me in a previous episode, which is something Olivia loves. And I know you love it as well, which is crocheting. And, it's weird how we bounce from one topic to another. We're talking about making coffee, making your bed, having our change of life. And now we're talking about crocheting. But when you think about crocheting, the point of it, and you could talk more to this, Sam, because you're more of an expert than me. I'm just the bystander watching my child making these really cool things, is you have to stack together chains. So you make a chain, you link the chain, you make the chain, you link the chain until it becomes the creation that you want it to become. And so maybe it is in the smallest of these things, whether it's a loop, which is the, crocheting, you make a loop and then that loop attaches to another loop. And in fact, when we get to the next chapter, we're going to talk about looping, but I want to be conscious of our time as well. So let's wrap up talking a little bit about crocheting and what that means to you, because you're a big advocate of this. Even I think in a club or you attend crocheting classes.
I did, yeah, I did. Gosh, that my mind is like going 1,000 miles a minute thinking about this analogy because it's beautiful for habits, right? Because like a loop when you're crocheting, I mean, all you are doing is tangling one piece of yarn together. That's it, right? And you're just tangling in a way that looks pretty at the end. And like, isn't that just an amazing analogy for habits and really what James was saying about them, right? Like one little stitch does not a blanket make here, but if you do one stitch and one stitch and one stitch and one stitch, and then you do 1,000 stitches, you have a really pretty, beautiful blanket, especially if you added some flair in there, right? You switched it up here and there in a way, but it was the last stitch that predicated the next stitch. So I have this blanket that my grandmother started. We found it in her house when we moved her to an Alzheimer's unit. And I'm the only person left in my family who knows how to crochet. So I took it to complete the blanket that she started. It's a baby blanket. And so in my head, I have these wonderful dreams of like, her great grandchildren being wrapped in this blanket that she started and I finished, which again, lots of analogies for life and family and all that sort of good stuff. But it took me a minute to figure out the pattern she was using. And it turns out she's just changing the stitches. There's a single stitch, a double stitch, a triple stitch, double stitch. So it's just like 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, like it just goes back and forth. It took me a minute to figure that out. But once I figured it out, it really is like this habit stacking of the last one predicates the next one, right? And the end of it is this really pretty looking pattern of this whole blanket, but it's one stitch at a time. It's whatever I did right? I did a 2-stitch last time and now I'm on a 3-stitch and then I'll be on a 2-stitch. And it's just this continual repetitive thing that's going to end up in this beautiful, intricate, wonderful, creation at the end of it. And if that's not a metaphor for habit stacking, like, gosh, I don't know, geez, I'm never going to think about crocheting that same again.
Well, I'm glad you're thinking of it that way, because when I look at the creations that Olivia makes, I'm looking at it in the same way, that it's not just that skein of yarn. It's that she's creating something from her brain and from her heart that's going to give joy to somebody else through her. And how beautiful that you're going going to be able to create this ending of a blanket that was started by your grandmother. It's super meaningful. Like, I feel super emotional with you even telling me the story. So these are the best ways to start new habits, one chain at a time, one stitch at a time, one loop at a time. I love that you were sharing, though, that it's not always the same loop. There's a pattern, but you can change it up to make something look different. Like, everybody that crochets doesn't make the exact same blanket or the exact same scarf. It just depends on how you're looking at it, from stepping back, deciding what you want to be or what you want this thing that you're creating to be, and how you're going to approach it by stacking the way that you create the stitches. So I think on that note, maybe we come to the close of this chapter, leave our listeners on another cliffhanger. We thought we were going to talk about how, right, motivation is overrated and it's the environment that matters most. And indeed it does. But right now we're still talking about what motivates us to create these new habits and the best way to create the habits. So a couple quick things on the summary. Sam, I think for me, what I took away from this chapter, which has now been 2 episodes, is that the 2 most common cues to create and start new habits is your time and your location, making sure you have the time and making sure you decide the time of day to do something, and the location being where and why is that important to you. And that the second thing being that we covered in the last 2 episodes 2 important things. Number 1, the implementation intention formula, which says that I will do X, I will do something at some X time in some location. I will do X at X time in X location. The third thing being this habit stacking formula, or in our analogy, the crocheting formula, which is after I do this one thing, then I'll do this other one thing. And so for you listeners, maybe it is that you start something at the front of your day, like Sam has talked about what she does to start off and kick off her day. But maybe for you, it's also what you do in the middle of your day, or perhaps it's what you do at the end of your day. So Sam, what was maybe your biggest takeaway or summary recaps for the listeners on this great chapter about starting new habits?
Yeah, I think that it's got to be, you have to be specific with it. It's the same thing I would tell you if I was coaching you is, you've got to, when you're trying to do something and move towards a new identity, a goal, or whatever, you have to be very specific. I will do this very specific thing at this very specific time, or after this very specific other thing that's happening. And this is what it's going to look like. That kind of preparation helps you pull it off in a way that is just not possible otherwise. So get specific, right? When we talk about SMART goals, like that's what we're talking about. Be super specific about how you're pulling this off, because that's what's going to set you up for success eventually.
Absolutely. In fact, that's the very first letter of that acronym, being specific. Well, we're going to talk next time, like we said, about chapter number 6, which is still in the law number 1 of making things obvious. It's about making the environment matter just as much, if not more, than motivation. So, hey, friends, thanks for listening. We hope that you're getting value from this. If you are, share a note with us. We'll have in the show notes ways to get in contact with us. We'd love for you to subscribe and share our podcast with your friends. It helps us to build an audience and be able to share these insights with more people. Hopefully, you're also seeing this is not just a recap of the book. It's how we're living it out loud and drinking deeply from the pages of the books that we're sharing. So once again, my name is Denise Russo. On behalf of my friend Sam Powell, thanks for joining us again today on another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.